Please pray with me. Lord, in this holy season of Advent, as we prepare our hearts, minds, and souls for the coming again of the Christ child, we ask you to open up our hearts, open up our souls, open up our minds, most of all, open up our ears to receive what you would want us to hear today. In your name we pray. Amen. Have a seat, please. So, Anna, I'm calling this sermon title, The God of Silver Linings. It was either that or the refrain from the song, well, I'll get to in a second, but I think as I prayed about it between services, this sermon is called The God of Silver Linings. Good movie, by the way. Who stars in it? Thank you. David Brooks. I love me some David Brooks. He's a writer. He's a writer. He writes for the New York Times. He writes for the Atlantic. He writes in a bunch of places. I like him because he's a good American who understands that the only way we're going to make it in this country is that we can hold the tension between the left and the right of center and he must be a good Episcopalian. In some circles in the Episcopal Church, our denomination is known as the Church of the Via Media. In other words, the Church of the Middle Way. There's not a lot of middle way anymore. It's my way or the highway, right? So I love it when a therapist in our midst, she has a very thriving practice. In fact, I don't know any therapists who don't have a thriving practice right now. They're absolutely exhausted. And thank God for them because I know it sounds cliche, but COVID has really done a number on our country. If you're an educator, no one has to tell you that. The kids are more out of control than ever. I know I'm overstating it, but not too far from overstating it. They're out of control. And the Surgeon General reminds us all the time, for those who have ears to listen, not the COVID, but what's the number one epidemic now that we suffer from as a people, as a society? What's the number one epidemic? Leah, loneliness, isolation. If you sat by yourself and had Thanksgiving dinner by yourself, I read an article just yesterday, 10 years of your life come off if you eat by yourself on a regular basis. People who eat with other people add 10 years to your life. I'm not overstating. This is from experts. This is how important it is for us to feel connected, for us to have relationships, for us, like we're doing right now, to gussy yourself up, get out of bed, get in your car, and go to church to rub elbows with other human beings. It's life-saving stuff. So the article that David Brooks wrote, was back in August, and he wrote it for the Atlantic magazine. Some of you might know this article, and the title really grabbed me. It's called How America Got Mean. How America Got Mean. You know that viral video of that woman on the airline? Oh, come on. You don't tell me you don't know. Which one, right? The one who's obviously out of her tree and she's screaming at everybody as they're trying to escort her off the plane, and she's telling everybody, and she's ranting, and it's the viral video of the times. Don't look it up now. Don't look it up now. So I read David's article, and you can read it yourself. I'm not going to get into it. But boy, it keeps resonating with me. How America got mean. How America got mean. So as I ruminated and prayed and walked with the scriptures for this first Sunday in Advent, I have a question that I'm still wrestling with, and I submit to you. I'm going to share it with you. So my question for us all, as you hear my voice, can we change this? Can we change? Well, Mark 13, this chapter is written in a very hard-hitting way. It's apocalyptic in its style, its genre. And if you're familiar with this type of literature, and especially if you come from a church tradition where the preacher would hold the Bible open to the Revelation to John, the very last chapter, the very last book of the Bible, and would quote, chapter and verse and put the fear of God into you with all this apocalyptic imagery, like the skies falling and lightning bolts and people burning in fire and all that stuff. Look, you're an Episcopalian. You can't take that stuff literally. I have a theological education, so let me just submit to you that the word apocalypse is not in theological circles to be used as a fear-mongering device. It's not to make you more afraid. The word apocalypse simply means to pull back the cover and to reveal the truth. But no one does that anymore in America, do we? So everybody on television, what do? They just stoke fear. Fear. So it's up to you and me to get our hands on articles that Brother David Brooks submits, because he's a learned dude. And he goes into all the reasons why we are mean. And it has nothing to do with fear. I'll give you the Crib Notes version of it. He said this. He said, it's a failure of our institutions which teach morality. Where's Don Weir? Don, we don't have the Boy Scouts of America like we did when you were growing up, where young men like Evan are taught to be kind. Thank God he has parents teaching your boy to be kind. And that's a whole other, you can sit down. Thank you very much, Don. Like a good Boy Scout, right? Thank God, because there's a lot of people who are writing about how young men in America are getting hammered because no one's teaching them values and they're growing up angry. All these first-person lone wolf shooters are not girls. They're men who are PO'd at the world. The world's against them because they've not had the kind of mentoring. And so Brooks says church and synagogue and those boys clubs and girls clubs of America. And honestly, I'm looking at Al Gruby because Army Navy's right there in my mind. And if he didn't go to the Naval Academy, I dare say, Al Gruby, you would never know, unless your parents were extraordinary parents, you would never know the kind of moral foundation and values of what it means to be a good citizen, a good American. Would you say yes to that, Al? There it is. I was hoping you'd cough that up. I'm glad to hear that you had good parents. So you had two things going for you, and that's why you're a nice guy. Right? So apocalyptic literature for us church Episcopalians is just pulling back the veneer and getting to the root, the truth. Daniel Harrington, a Jesuit guy, New Testament scholar, he said this about apocalyptic literature, and I love it because he must be Episcopalian. He says, quote, "We will never know how literally Mark intended the apocalyptic imagery in chapter 13 to be taken, so I would add to my own editorial license, so then relax and don't worry about it." And I know that the world prefers when it hits the fan to cry out to God, God, deliver me. But what if what you're going through right now, and what if your world is upside down, but what if instead of asking God to help deliver you from it, what if you ask God, where are you in the midst of this? Man, I got to keep it PG. Sometimes I wish I could just speak to a bunch of, no disrespect, I could preach to a bunch of sailors. You might be a retired sailor, so you know what I'm talking about. So why don't we talk about God in the midst of your upside down world working powerfully, and for you to be able to see this? Because my question is, that's how we change. We let God do the changing. And if you follow my line of thought, too often in North American Christianity, you and I are taught that you're the agent of change. If you want to change, it's up to you. And I submit to you, and you young people listening, I wish I would have learned a long time ago to submit to what God wanted to change in my life instead of me grabbing the wheel so tightly. I might cue the Carrie Underwood song, Jesus. Carrie Underwood. All right, we're talking now. You following? Jesus, take the wheel. So what if Advent is like that? What if we exclaim in the midst of whatever we're going through, Jesus, you need to take the wheel because I don't have anything left in the tank. I don't know where else to turn. I don't know what else to do. If I was in Baptist church, I'd hear someone say, preach it, brother. Preach it. Come on, give it to me. Preach it. Oh, I got some good stuff here. I'm going deep. I'm going deep. So here's the deal. What if Jesus? Oh, man, this is going to hit you hard. Oh, this is my physical therapy. I'm working on my core strength. What if Jesus is the one bringing about the change in your life? What if he's the one bringing about what you're going through? Now listen to me carefully. Listen to me carefully, because some of you rabble-rousers, you're already down the rabbit hole. This is a very important theological distinction, because you know, if you've heard me preach for any amount of time, you know I don't believe that Jesus gives us alcoholism. I don't believe that Jesus gives me cancer. I don't believe that Jesus took your teenage son because, as I heard in the denominational church 30 years ago, which I'll leave unnamed, the preacher in the pulpit stared at the open casket at the teenage boy and said to the congregation, God needed another flower in heaven. And 1,000 Christians said, hallelujah, Pastor. I don't believe in that kind of God. Is it the time and the place for me to stand up like I wanted to? I was on the dais. For me to stand up and shout that preacher down? What kind of theology is that? Of course not. That's not the time or place. Have I been in emergency rooms where there's dead babies and the mom is looking at me with tears in her eyes going, you know, God's going to give me everything I need to get through this. Is that for me to say, that's, honey, not the best theology in the world? No, I shut my mouth and I cry with her and I hold her in her pain. And when the time comes and she's in my office, I'll unpack for her that I don't believe God needed another flower in heaven, and that's why he or she took the baby. No, here it is. The God of silver linings is where we, in the midst of that pain and that suffering, can see God's hand if we allow ourselves to see it. My experience is we're such in pain, we're not able to see it. And this is it, guys. I got to tell you, if you're in pain right now and you can't see the silver linings of what God is doing in your life, it's probably because you're isolated and you've cut yourself off from your support group. If you're in recovery right now and you think you're doing just fine and you haven't been to a 12-step meeting in 3 years because you think you can do it on your own, I'm here to tell you that the God of silver linings is in this AA group, which meets every Saturday at noon, which meets every Sunday night at 7, which meets every Thursday night in the youth building at 7. The God of silver linings in your recovery looks like, and this is what Matthew Perry said in his book when he helped Hank Azaria, the actor who speaks like 5 of the Simpson voices. You know The Simpsons? The Simpsons. Hank Azaria does like the Scottish guy, and he does the Slurpee guy, and he's the voiceover guy. Hank Azaria, he's an actor. And Hank Azaria is a drunk. He's an alcoholic. And Matthew Perry said to Hank Azaria, his buddy, you got to go to an AA meeting. And he said, why? Because Matthew Perry said, because an AA meeting is God with a bunch of drunks in the room. And Hank Azaria went, and Hank Azaria is clean and sober ever since because he goes to those meetings. The God of silver linings. Can we find him? Can we find God? And not only, here it is, we need others around us to help find God in those dark places that we find ourselves in life. But we have to hear what the Isaiah, brother Isaiah, the prophet, is saying today. He's saying, oh God, I need to hear this because I really don't want to be the clay. I really don't like going around on a spinning table at 1,000 RPMs while God gets God's fingers into me and starts doing this. I'd rather be in the chair in charge of the clay. But you know what, guys? I got to stay on the wheel. You got to go on the round and the round and the round. And if Martin Sherrington was here, your daddy, I would start singing, Abba, Abba, Father, you are the potter, and I am the clay. I'm outing your father. That is his all-time, Sarah, you know it's true. That is his all-time anthem. And if he was here, he would testify why that song is so important to him. Because I'm guessing there was a time in your father, your husband's life, when he, like me, like a lot of people listening to my voice, wanted to stay in the chair instead of staying on the wheel. And when Martin Sherrington submitted to God and was born again and got out of the chair and got back on the wheel, he's the man, your daddy, I'm looking at you, he's the man he is today. He's the husband, Sarah, that he is today because he stays on the wheel. A Jesuit, another Jesuit. I like me the Jesuits. James Martin says it like this, talking about the potter and the clay. James Martin says, God must reshape, rework, and reform the clay for it to become a strong piece of pottery. And for me, there are two levels of that formation which apply to everyone. There is the visible level, which others can see. It's a more public formation. You go to school, you graduate, you start a new job, you take vows, you get married, so on. The second one is an invisible level, a more private formation. We suffer heartbreak over a broken relationship. We get diagnosed with cancer. We lose someone we love. We fail a course. We have a transformative insight during a retreat or a therapy session. Both levels, Brother Martin says, not Martin Sherrington, bear with me, James Martin. Both levels of formation are important. Martin Smith says we cannot neglect either way that the potter is forming the clay. To do this, we have to be attentive to the signs of the times and the sometimes unexpected invitations. Here it is, for us to undergo what John the Baptist and Jesus calls metanoia, which is a thoroughgoing change of mind and heart. So yes, there it is. That is the fancy theological term for getting out of the chair and getting back on the potter, on the wheel, to go round and round. It's that 180-degree turn. You want to be in charge? Good luck with that. And then when the bottom falls out, that's when you say, enough's enough. And some of you here are living miracles, and others aren't. I've buried people who could never get this. They did it their way. But some of us have been blessed to have people in our lives who said, Tom, you are better than this. I'm like, what do you mean, hun? She was my flatmate at the time. She was just a friend of mine, my wife, to this day. She's just saying to me all the time, you are better than this. What do you mean? There's nothing wrong with me. She said, you are in more trouble than you even know. And I'm referring to my drinking habits. I thought I was in total control of my drinking habits. I could still function as a middle school teacher after being out all night drinking 10 pints. By the grace of God, and a police officer in his squad car coming up behind me, right in front of my apartment, right in front of my flat there on Great Western Road in Aberdeen, Scotland. I look up and I see red and green lights flashing off and on. I said to myself, that's curious. He must have pulled someone over. My heart in that moment was like, shoo. I looked down. and I could see I didn't have my lights on. Oof is right. Someone, thank you for that. Oof. You want to talk about the God of silver linings? In that moment with my heart and the shame that came over me so powerfully, like, well, I really screwed the you know what. I'm done. I'm going to lose my job. I'm going to get fired. I'm going to go home. I'm going to lose my friend who turned out to become my wife. In that moment, you want to talk about the God of silver linings? You know what came to me? Thank God I didn't kill anybody. Thank God I didn't kill myself. If I'd have kept drinking, I would have probably done one of the two. The God of silver linings. I walk in, it's early morning. I still have my coat and tie on from the previous day's teaching, right? Spiker, you can't believe it. I'm looking like, Saren's coming, she's waking up and she's like, you're all dressed and ready to go. Wait a minute, you're in the same outfit as you were yesterday. Come on, man. I said, no, I just got back from being in jail all night long. She said, excuse me? And I looked at her, and I was so filled with shame, and I started bawling. And she said, are you ready now? I said, what do you mean by that? She said, you ready to go to church now? I said, I'm ready. A couple days later, we went to her Presbyterian Scottish church, the Kirk, right there in Great Western Road. And that damn preacher boy with that heavy brogue accent got up in the pulpit, I kid you not, and guess what the gospel was for that day? Prodigal son. I was wasting my inheritance in a foreign land, and I brought shame all the way to the point where I looked around and like the pigs were having a better time than me. The God of silver linings was in that sermon. I came out of that church service, I guess you could say born again. I mean, I got hit pretty hard by the Holy Spirit to clean my act up. But of course, I'm an arrogant Episcopalian. I turned to my friend. She wasn't even my girlfriend at the time. She was just my flatmate. I said, that was a really nice service, but do you mind going to the Anglican Cathedral down the street next Sunday? And like her middle name, Ruth, like in the Bible, she did not bat an eye, and Saren Ruth Ball at the time said, I would be glad to go with you to your Anglican Cathedral service next Sunday. That was the last Sunday she set foot in a Presbyterian church following this, I want to say, work in progress. I still am. We all are. So I share that with you because God said, after what you've come out from this summer, my child, you will preach the truth to your people. I mean, you're not my people. You're his people. You're God's people. But I will speak to you in my homilies in a way I frankly have held back because, don't want to offend, don't want you not to not like me, all those reasons we put on masks. But it's time, as I pray about, it's time for me, but I invite you to search your own heart this Advent season. Where are some of the things that you need to be honest about? First with yourself, and then with those around you. Because we're such in a fear state and we're so paralyzed, I just don't see a lot of people speaking the truth in love, so to speak, with those we care about. We walk on eggshells, and the church walks on eggshells. And guess what? Then God is not glorified in that. So I had this all set this morning, and I thought that was just to find a good enough sermon. And because I'm an open vessel and I'm praying all the time to be more and more open, and honestly, I'm a wannabe rock and roller. I was going to tell you this, so what the heck, I'm going to tell you now. So I had this, how we doing? This, okay, yeah, it was good. It's not noon yet. So this is what God's doing in my life. So I got an invitation to go to like a party at someone's house. And I read down on the email, and it said it's going to be real fun. It's going to be about 15 of us, and we want you and Sarn to come because we know Tom likes his music, and because we got somebody who's going to play in our living room, just them and their guitar and their little piano. And I'm reading, and it turns out it's the former lead singer of the band from Santa Barbara, California, called Dishwalla. Does anybody know Dishwalla? That's all I need, Chuck. One person. Chuck, I confess, I didn't know who they were. They're a little bit in the 90s, mid-90s, 95-ish. They're a little bit more on the pop side of my sensibilities when it comes to rock and roll, like a little bit more of Metallica. So I was curious, so I looked up their number one single. The band had a number one single called, do you know it, Chuck? The number one single from Dishwalla from 95. Billboard charts. I'm putting you on the spot. Counting blue cars. Counting blue cars. He sang, J.R. Richards, who wrote that song and was the one-time lead singer of Dishwalla, but now he's solo. He sang that song in the living room in downtown Vancouver Friday night, and it touched my heart so deeply. When he finished singing it, again, I'm on this trajectory of not holding back. You're like, oh God, if he's not going to hold back, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, oh my God, he's never held back, and now he's not going to hold back even more. So when he was done, there was a little bit of a silence before he turned the page to sing his next song, and I just shouted out at JR, and I said, excuse me. And he looked at me, he said, yeah? Can you tell me more about that refrain that you wrote that goes like this? Tell me all your thoughts on God, 'cause I am gonna see her. Maybe no. He said, really? I said, yeah. I said, I'm an Episcopal priest. And then JR said, I'm an Episcopalian as well. And I'll tell you about that song. And he explained that song to me. And then he told me this. Because in that refrain, after he says, tell me all your thoughts on God, because I really want to meet her. He used the feminine pronoun of God, 1995, and received death threats. So much so, 1995, a woman in Florida sent him a picture of her 9mm. 1995, because the rock and roller used the pronoun her for God. And I said to him, brother, I received my first death threat in August of this year in an email to Tom Warren, because I welcome, as the rector of this parish, because I welcome all of God's children. And the email said, I'm going to kill them. We're talking LGBTQ brothers and sisters. And pastor, I'm going to come after and kill you, me. At the end of the night, JR and I had a sidebar where he wrote the lyrics out to Counting Blue Cars by hand. And at the bottom said, Father Tom, keep doing what you're doing. JR. That's not for me to toot my horn. It's the power of music. And I said to Anna in the back, when she was on her laptop, and I looked over and I saw Shepherd Song was at full bench today, I whispered to Anna, oh, look out. I was ready to get in my car and come this morning, and God laid one more song on my heart. And Joel, I know you already made note of this. It's a Brandon Lake. He's quite famous right now. And Cody Carnes duet called Too Good to Not Believe. I'm standing before you, inviting you to listen to this song and let it be your Advent anthem. Here it is. I played it 5 times. My wife's like, we got to go to church. I said, just one more time, just one more. I got to get this in me. And I don't have it in me all the way, but I have on my phone here the refrain of this song. The song, again, is called Too Good to Not Believe. And I'm telling you, this refrain literally put me on my back. We've seen cancer disappear. We've seen broken bodies healed. Don't you tell me he can't do it. Don't you tell me he can't do it. We've seen real life resurrection. We've seen mental health restored. Don't you tell me he can't do it. Don't you tell me he can't do it. We've seen families reunited. We've seen prodigals return. Don't you tell me he can't do it. Don't you tell me he can't do it. We've seen troubled souls delivered. We've seen addicts finally freed. Don't you tell me he can't do it. Don't you tell me he can't do it. And I'm telling you right now, I was with a person the last couple of weeks. This is as honest and gritty as it comes, and it kills me because I'm living with so much bloody survivor guilt that my cancer got cut out. And I'm with people having pancreatic cancer, having esophageal cancer. They're stage 4. It's all through them. And the loved ones are looking at me and they're saying, Father Tom, but they could just cut the cancer out and just be done with it like you had it done with you. I get my kid back. I get my husband back. And I want to say to them, because maybe I was too chicken when I didn't say it enough, and I want to be clear when I say to them, the God of silver linings is like this. Don't you tell me God can't put that cancer in remission. Don't you tell me God can't put that cancer into remission. Don't you tell me God can't put your marriage back together. Don't you tell me God can't rescue you from the bottle. Don't you tell me that you can't get a job. Don't you tell me. Don't you tell me. Don't you tell me. Don't you tell me that God is out of the business of miracles. Don't you tell me that God has given up on me or on you. Don't you tell me he's given up on your kid. Don't you tell me he's given up on your wife. Don't you tell me he's given up on America. Don't you tell me. Don't you tell me. Don't you tell me. Don't you tell me, man. He reached down and he worked through people who never gave up on me. And if you're not giving up on that loved one who is in the tunnel, who is in the hole, who is in the pit, you got to remind them, don't give up. God is not done yet. Don't you tell me he can't do it. The God of silver linings, whether we live or die, the God of silver linings is in the cancer. He's in the bottle. He's in the suicide. He's in the loneliness. He's in there. You got to look for him. Advent. The baptizer. The baptizer. You got to prepare. Prepare means you got to turn off the devices. Prepare means you got to light that Advent wreath and turn off the television. Prepare means you got to carve time out daily to listen to God and the voice of God to tell you, I can do this. And my child, I will give you what you need so you can do this. That's Advent. Don't you tell me. Don't you tell me he can't do it. And the people say, Amen.